Romans 11:33 says, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out." Because check it out, guys, for the Christmas story to play out like it does, for even just this one prophecy from Micah to be fulfilled, it would take a depth of wisdom and knowledge that, like Paul says, is quite literally beyond tracing out. To fulfill just this one prophecy, all sorts of variables, including our human nature, including human free will, national, social, political events across 700 years, would need to be calculated, factored in, adjusted for, and mapped out. And then on top of that, God would still need to not just figure out the plan, but actually carry out and execute the plan. Alrighty, guys, so have you seen this one before? Have you seen that thing that God does where you're in the Word, you're reading a passage for what seems like the 20th time, and then suddenly out of nowhere, it's like you're reading it again for literally the first time, and God's just doing his thing. I mean, he's dropping all kinds of truth, all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of revelation. That was me just the other day while I was in Luke reading the Christmas story, which if we haven't at least read it, we've heard the sermons, we've seen the movies, we've watched the plays, seen the skits, and so on. But this is what God showed me, guys. Check it out. Luke 2, verse 1 to 7. All right, so Luke 2, verse 1 to 7, and the title of this passage is The Birth of Jesus. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everybody went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. All right, so Joseph was from Galilee, right? But he and Mary had to travel over 80 to 90 miles from Galilee to Bethlehem in Judea. Now, pushing 9 months pregnant, there's next to nothing outside of this sort of event that would make any couple, even today, undertake this sort of journey, let alone back then, when it was either a journey on foot or best case scenario on a donkey. As I was reading this, I remember I felt the Holy Spirit ask, are there any prophecies that point to where Jesus would be born? Now, I knew for sure that I had come across at least one or two. There are actually quite a number of prophecies in the Old Testament that point to the birth, the death, the resurrection, and actually the return of Jesus Christ. Check it out. Micah 5, verse 2 to 4. Alrighty, so then from the Micah passage, the title of it is A Promised Ruler from Bethlehem. But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come from me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. This is the crazy part that God began to prompt me to look into, and this is something that I do not want you guys to miss. The events from Micah 5 and Luke 2 are actually separated by almost 700 years. For reference, the U.S. as a nation, as we know it today, is only 250 years old. In 250 short years, we've seen a couple of world wars, we've seen a revolution, we've seen major economic collapses, we've seen political crises, we've seen massive technological advances, and so on. Now hang with me, because this is a part that really blows my mind. 700 years of history had to play out while God was working out his plan, while God was lining things up perfectly for this promise to be fulfilled. Because notice, in Luke chapter 2, verse 1, it's actually Augustus Caesar who decrees that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. It's actually a secular event that triggers a number of the events that we see play out in the Luke 2 passage. See how even in that, edicts are going out, history is still playing out, but God is still in full control. God is working in it. He's working through it, in spite of it, despite it, to fulfill a word that he had spoken 700 years prior. And this is the part that gets me, but let me know what you guys think. God's wisdom, God's power, God's understanding, God's ability to do something with these qualities has surely got to be on a completely different level than we realize, even as Christians in a day-to-day life that may involve spending time in his word, that may involve spending time at church, that may involve spending time learning God's story through whatever means. So even in this example, we see the Christmas story and we do get a glimpse of those qualities. We see the star. We hear the angels. We recognize that wise men still seek him. But even in that, and all of this is amazing, we still don't get a full picture as to who God really is. So then in my example, as God was teaching me something, as he was teaching me something new through this passage, the question that kind of came up to mind for me, the question that God challenged me with was, what about the power of God? What about the wisdom of God? Now, I had never quite seen God from this angle through the Christmas story, because when we read the Christmas story and we read it for what it is, God shows up as humble, as lowly. He shows up as baby Jesus in a manger. But when we read that same Christmas story in the full context of the biblical narrative, suddenly we see that God is exactly who he says he is. He is all powerful. He is all knowing. He is awesome in power. And actually, there's a passage that I love, and it's from Romans 11:33. Let me pull it up real quick. All right, so then Romans 11:33 says, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out." Because check it out, guys, for the Christmas story to play out like it does, for even just this one prophecy from Micah to be fulfilled, it would take a depth of wisdom and knowledge that, like Paul says, is quite literally beyond tracing out. To fulfill just this one prophecy, all sorts of variables, including our human nature, including human free will, national, social, political events across 700 years, would need to be calculated, factored in, adjusted for, and mapped out. And then on top of that, God would still need to not just figure out the plan, but actually carry out and execute the plan. I got one more passage for you, and it is from Psalm 46:10. In Psalm 46:10, it says this, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And so for me, maybe that is a Christmas message for 2025. Just be still and know that God is exactly who he says he is, and that God will do exactly what he says he does. But that's just me. What about you guys? Jump in the comments, let me know what you think. And actually, let me know, has God done anything similar in your life lately where he's showed you something from his word, maybe just in a new or a different light? That's all I got for now. Hit that like button, jump in the comments, hit that subscribe, because at the end of the day, the reality is this: if this has been challenging to you, if this has been encouraging to you, there's still a chance that you may never come across this page again, you may never come across this account again. But I do believe that God is up to something and we are in this together. I love you guys, and I will see you next time.